adventures of Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog Yukon as they meet the challenge of the Yukon.
God's gotta pray what I don't get, 'cause when God talk back to me, they say I'm schizophrenic. When it comes to money, I'm in for these screws. My niggas rob niggas, then they bring me their jewels. I used to ask God for things, but I would never get it. Now I just steal it and ask God for forgiveness. You worry about the wrong man. I'm the shooter. Give a man an inch, and he think he the ruler. There's no I in team, but there is a me. American dream to believe that you gotta be a slave. I know it's bad, but I'm high anyway. We help stay fit high anyway. They talk to God, gotta pray, but I don't get it. 'Cause when God talk back to me, they say I'm schizophrenic. I don't talk shit, I pull up pistols. I'm like a ventriloquist. Never see my lips move. Throwing money up, never get skinny dipping. Box fat, can even go skinny dipping. I started with nothing and still had most of it. I'm pulling out hammers, bridge all the best. I can't remember the last time I forgot something. Niggas is decoration, niggas, so stop fronting. It's sticky fingers, I'm maniac depressing. I'm passive aggressive. You better spread the message. You know who the best is. Better have your best. I'm good, big, black, and ugly. I call that bitch precious. I sweat on my nose. They say that I'm an evil brother. I'm a warlock. I see things and dream of color. You think it can't happen till you got flesh. But you also make it right. But believe me, 3 laps.
We keep it clean with the whips, clean up with the guns, stacks on 100, right, we get the ones, Kush stroke sticky, niggas smoke guns, just a grown man, P.I., they acting like his sons, I don't give a shit, give a shit, the niggas, we don't give a shit, give a shit, tell them they proud, I don't give a shit, give a shit, the niggas, we don't give a shit, give a shit,
I know the hood like I came back so hard, such a time. Must be an act of God. Yo, stick your finger back, and he grind me again with that double barrel shotgun like Siamese twins. It's always the nigga with the biggest mouth that can fuck first. Not as bad as people say, believe me, I'm much worse. Can't believe they can't see through how you be fucking. You know the cost of anything, but you value nothing. And even if a bitch got a fuck to make you use a mother nature, yeah, you can fuck all the time taking. I heard everybody out my high. I believe the horoscopes, nigga, my sign is Bible. Listen, nigga, I'll make a deal with you. Stop lying on me, or I'll start telling the truth about you. About my hip-hop niggas, and my hip-hop bitches, and bitches back. Now it's y'all for 2 wishes. And I'ma keep grinding till they close the curtain. I don't know what makes you so whack. Nigga, it's burn, nigga, it's burn. I carry so much heat, you think it was arrested. Violence ain't the answer, you need to rephrase the question. Shit, I was born to be a pessimist. Even my blood type, C-type negative. Refuse to go quietly into the night. Live every day like it should last. But they have been right.
we keep it clean.
Yeah, but he didn't have enough to pay for his charge of back it. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't expect to get it from him.
It's a throwback, yeah. Blue pack. Now when mad chop walks, people mad chop books. I swear to God, I should be there from all the pills I took, but I'll be okay. Yeah. Raise your hands if you're going insane. If you're feeling so depressed, you wanna blow out your brain, and you've been to darker places, you won't try to explain, but still you try to keep it moving, then we're probably the same. We used to get high like trucks on lift kits. Then I woke up and I said, said, fuck this shit. I made a promise to myself, mad rip shit. Slide through your verse like a Tokyo drift kid. From being at the doctor's on pills like please help me, to being on the hospital floor like please kill me. And I ain't scared of dying except there's nothing to inherit. And I owe lots of people money, including my parents. I'm trying to sit the right, but I have mental interference. Cause I got inner demons that are screaming out my lyrics. And I'm new to this new game where kids out talk shit. That's why I'm writing rhymes that even they can't fuck with. Let me do a show, let me catch somebody chuckle. I won't stop until my hands hurt and I got bloody knuckles. Then I'll take this girl and turn that boy into a cuckold. To tell the truth, I ain't fucking with them chuckles. Mad child walks, people mad child looks. I swear to God, I should be getting all the pills I take, but I'll be okay.
That's gonna keep happening.
It's a throwback.
It's plain as fucking denial of service attacks. Like, this is how pathological trauma is. Don't have any audio whatsoever. This is good. That. That's not what I asked them to do. And this is how pathological sex offenders are. They will never change. This idiot started on me and has never stopped. Oh, dude. So, what exactly is wrong with every single piece of software I have? Wow. It doesn't download 2 seconds of the sound, man. It does not even know how the software works.
Voice.
All right. You don't want to scare the daylights out of me. You better tell us where the gold is.
4th time in a row that's happening.
I won't.
I'll go get the kid.
It's the 4th time in a row. It's presumed.
Well, make it quick then. Where is it?
It's in the shoebox over that cupboard.
I see she's there. Watch her a minute, Dave. All right.
System UI isn't responding. Of course not. Because no one's interacting with it.
It's got plenty of it.
No, please, Joel. You have the gold.
Yeah, but before we do, we're going to tie you up. Yeah, good idea. She might...
Way to wave that pedophile flag around. We've done this 2,200 videos in a row, dog.
Meantime, in the other room, Freddie was awakened by the sound of voices.
These are Greater Toronto, because there's maps. So it would be Greater Toronto, Greater Montreal, and when Montreal is what you want. Never do any research on bikers in Canada. Then Montreal would be one of the places to go. So staggering, these numbers. Winnipeg has 44. Winnipeg's is quite high, actually.
For the entire year, you're saying, or total?
That's for all of 2019.
Okay, so in 2020, last year, it was probably a 50-year high for St. Louis. Population of St. Louis is 308,000, but the metropolitan area is like 2.2, 2.3 million. But if you look at just St. Louis, where all the homicides seem to happen, we had like 250 last year for 300,000 people.
Wow.
It's terrible. It's ridiculously terrible.
So that's more than any city in Canada. 2019, unfair comparison, but
Yeah.
in the spirit of taking a look. Whoa.
A lot of cities have homicide issues right now, huge upticks in all the major cities. Surprisingly, the only major city that had lower homicides were Baltimore, which is historically also known as a dangerous crime area.
Yeah, I flew into Baltimore once. Boy, I got out of there quick. The whole airport was scary even.
Oh, what is this? Well, they're welcoming on the airport until you get onto the Metrolink, the public transportation. Then after that, you better watch out.
Well, I took a shuttle to a car rental. And that shuttle was one of those big articulating buses, like the big ones. And it was so crowded. And there was people arguing. And then there was a comedian who was like famous guy from TV who was standing next to me. And there was a lady in the corner who was so excited to see him. She was phoning her friends and taking pictures of it. And I leaned over and I'm like, look, dude, I have no idea who you are, but I got to tell you, this is weird. And he's like, it's weird for you. It's weird for me. And we went into the car rental place and we were together in line, so we had a good chance to visit. I still have no idea who he was.
Oh,
it was weird.
You were next to someone famous that people were sought after,
Yep.
and you don't know who. So one day you'll flip through the TV and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's the car rental guy.
Yeah, that's the guy. I don't
That's
know.
him.
Well, Ryan, congratulations on the new gig. We, for all of the shift heads that are listening, we are working on ways to connect and find ways to keep this sort of alive on the
You were
ship.
next
So no
to
need to
someone
worry
famous that people were
might
sought
be-
after,
Yep.
and you don't know who. So one day you'll flip through the TV and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's the car rental guy.
Yeah, that's the guy. I don't know.
In creating sustainable development of AI. So that is one stream of thought. And a lot of the personal information protection regulation in China does derive inspiration from the European Union's GDPR and its own approach to privacy protection. But there's this other stream of thought that the reason why the EU is adopting such strong regulation on AI is because the EU doesn't have its own tech giants like China's Tencent or Baidu and Alibaba that benefit from vacuuming up all this personal data and applying AI algorithms. So the other view is that this type of regulation would only hamper China's AI tech giants.
And is it right to think of China as an AI superpower because it has forged ahead relatively on it with relatively little impediment?
I think it's hard to say, like back in the late 19th century, who was the electricity superpower. Electricity was still in the very early stages, and it took decades to take hold across the entire economy. So I think we're still very much in the early innings, and it's not necessarily about who leads in some of the initial applications, but it's about who's able to diffuse and spread AI across all sectors of the economy. And maybe the EU's regulation will help the EU firms, EU countries to diffuse AI technology on the course of decades in a more sustainable way, in a way that people find trustworthy and willing to accept.
And how is it clear how the Chinese authorities collaborate with developers, with AI developers? What is that relationship between the state and companies, developers in the private sector?
In the surveillance space, for example, with facial recognition technology, there has been a very close-knit partnership between the Chinese state, especially its public security bureaus, and facial recognition startups like MagV or SenseTime, which are some of the leading facial recognition startups in the world. And mostly that collaboration consists of the public security bureaus sharing data collected from surveillance cameras with these facial recognition companies and then leveraging their interfaces to develop more precise ways of surveilling their populations.
Jeffrey, is there a distinction to be made then between the kind of technology that's being developed that's consumer facing, which obviously people understand, they see the
Visit spacediamonds.com.
governments. So you're allowed to complain much more about companies leaking personal information and not taking good care of your data and privacy in that instrumental sense as data security almost. Whereas there's not as much discussion of privacy as this intrinsic civil right that protects people from intrusive government surveillance.
That's Jeffrey Ding, creator of the China AI newsletter. Alexandra Gies, should we be worried about China when we think about regulatory concerns?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think the Chinese model of total surveillance is one of the reasons that pushed the Commission to come up with their own regulation proposal, because this is exactly what we do not want. And this is why social scoring is especially mentioned among the prohibited applications.
Is it possible within a liberal democracy to achieve what China has done? In a sense, is our concern that China might actually be able to lead and dominate research because it's relatively unfettered?
I think it depends on what your purpose is. And this is what Commissioner Vestager, who is in charge of this regulation, said very open in the beginning of her mandate. It's AI with a purpose. So what is our purpose in Europe? Is it to achieve total surveillance? Then you have to focus on, for example, facial recognition technologies. If our purpose is to combat climate change, for example, we can use artificial intelligence, and this is what we should focus on. So let's focus on what is really desirable, what corresponds to our European idea of what a good life is and a free life is. And I think that's AI applied to technology, to technical purposes.
So Benjamin Miller, putting China to one side, looking at how the United States tends to approach things, looking at the reaction there was when the EU introduced GDPR, data protection, in the United States, is there likely to be sort of horror at the possibility of EU-style regulation? Where do you think the US might end up?
No, I don't think there was horror. I think there is certainly, we're at a moment in time where people recognize that well-crafted and intelligently designed regulation can actually help with the future development of these technologies. And I think what we've seen with the Biden administration is a concerted effort also to come up with an approach to regulation that's going to strike the right balance between protecting users and fostering innovation. I think the difference between the EU and the US largely revolves around sort of attitudes towards risk, progress, and innovation. In the European Union, there is a lot of reliance on the so-called precautionary principle. We think there may be some kind of downside. It hasn't happened yet, but let's just try and prevent it from happening in the first place. And in the US, which is a much more innovation-friendly society, the attitude is more around let's encourage people to build, to experiment. Let's see how a new technology is rolled out across society. And then afterwards, we'll take the necessary steps to adjust our legislation and our regulation to ensure that these technologies optimize for social good. And I think that is fundamentally the difference in attitude. And I fear that the European Union is basically sidelining itself from a category of really promising technological potential in order to prevent a future from coming about that is at the moment entirely speculative and hypothetical.
Briefly, Alexandra Gies?
We are lagging behind in some basic technologies, and I think we should invest in them. We should invest in semiconductors, we should invest in quantum computing, and so on. I think that's absolutely important, but that requires investment and not facial recognition technology or biased technology. So if you speak about innovation, you have to ask yourself, what is innovation? Is it more diverse and more open and freer society? Or is it society which has more inequality and where certain people are simply excluded from power? So let's go for innovation in the technical sector with artificial intelligence. That's perfectly possible, and it's really the good way forward. That is innovation. What we are seeing from artificial intelligence applied on people is that it's taking us back to the past.
Daniel Lufer?
Yeah, I mean, I so I would really agree with everything that Alexandra said there, that, we need to be nuanced about thinking about what aspects of this technology we want to pursue, what ones we don't, and it's really not an all or nothing thing, and we should be selective there. I would also say, in terms of the transatlantic cooperation, that the idea that there's no regulation on AI in the US is actually wrong, because some of the strongest restrictions on facial recognition, for example, are at the municipal level in the US. In Portland, Oregon, there's a ban that prohibits the use of facial recognition technologies by private entities in what they call places of public accommodation, so in publicly accessible spaces, but also libraries and things. And so we've actually seen fantastic grassroots initiatives in the US. And I think that, you know, the EU taking this step will give strength to those homegrown initiatives in the US, and I think can really, really strengthen their voices.
In the bigger, broader sense, we heard the physicist Stephen Hawking earlier talking about the day when computers essentially become better at solving problems than human beings are. In a sense, isn't that actually what we want to achieve, Benjamin Muller? Isn't that the full potential of AI?
The full potential of AI should be to enable us as a species to become better at shaping the environment we live in and creating the kind of societies that are ultimately good for human flourishing. And I think there is no doubt that information technology has helped us enormously in that regard. I think, you know, we are some ways away from anything that even begins to resemble artificial general intelligence. And I think that the innate advantages that human intelligence has over machines should not be underestimated. And so the point that I want to make is that if we're guided by fear that this is all going to go wrong, we're sort of forgetting our history. Humans have been very adept at using their intelligence to creatively come up with new technological solutions that helps us lead better lives.
This is a profound conversation and a vast one. I am going to wrap up in a sense, in a slightly trivial way, but a way which perhaps helps us to grasp the enormity of what we're discussing. Daniel Dufer, do you think AI will surpass us, as, say, we've seen in a film like Terminator, or do you think computers could end up being more friendly and helpful, which I think is what Benjamin Muller is trying to say, that this is perfectly possible, like, I don't know, a character like C-3PO in Star Wars?
I think I always just want to separate discussions of what we're talking about now under this regulation as AI. It's an umbrella term that we're using because this thing is called an AI regulation. But I would fully separate it from these kind of science fiction discussions about conscious, intelligent machines. It's an interesting philosophical science fiction conversation, but the approaches that we're looking at today are actually far more mundane. When you lift the lid on how things like machine learning work, there's no magic there. And often what they're doing is just replicating the ideas, the biases of their designers, and what we could call reifying certain social categories, like masking the fact that things are socially constructed and making them appear like objective facts. So I would split that. I think we can have that conversation. Maybe it's best done through movies, and let's keep it to Star Wars and other things. And I think, as Benjamin said, we shouldn't forget our history, but I'll turn that around and say we should look at how technologies have actually been used to hinder, if not reverse, social progress sometimes. And to just always remember that technological progress is not always equal to and not always compatible with social progress, and we need to be, you know, nuanced and wise about deciding which aspects of technological progress we accept and promote and which ones we put a lid on.
Alexandra Gies, are you going to be optimistic, or do you share those concerns about AI actually overtaking humans?
I'm optimistic. I try to point out the issues in order to solve them. So I think we can use AI as a tool, but AI is a sort of a mirror that forces us to look into it and to say, how do we want to fix these issues? What kind of society do we want to live in?
You're just playing with words.
With your questions, you have to sound alright. You always ask what it's all about, so listen to smart reply. You say to me, I don't talk enough, but when I do, I'm a fool. These times I spent, I realize you should I need you. Some things you say, your punch just give you away. Some things you say is what I learned from mom. Some things you say,
this spring on Showcase.
My patriarchal ancestor, Lawrence Rutherford, founded our
town. The creator of The Good Place and Parks and Recreation.
Nathan, I'm calling to request
In just a moment, Sergeant Preston will give you a preview of Wednesday's adventure. Discover why Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice win the praise of many a He-Man Hollywood movie star. Try wheat or rice shot from guns yourself at breakfast tomorrow. These king-size grains are really swell tasting. They're exploded up to 8 times normal size to make them crisp and tender. They're good for you, too. Remember, Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice are never sold in bags or bulk. Always buy the big red and blue package with the smiling Quaker man on the front. That's your guarantee that you're getting the original, crisp, fresh Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice. These radio dramas, a feature of the Challenge of the Yukon Incorporated, are created and produced by George W. Trendle, directed by Fred Flowerday, and edited by Fran Stryker. The part of Sergeant Preston is played by Paul Sutton. They are brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the same time by Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice, a breakfast cereal shot from guns. Listen Wednesday when Sergeant Preston and Yukon King meet the challenge of the Yukon in the case of the empty coffin.
Why should a man want the world to think him dead? That was the mystery we had to solve in this case. King and I found the answer when the trail of a man the world thought dead turned out to be the trail of a murderer.
Be sure to hear this exciting adventure Wednesday. Ever notice how some dogs have thick, glossy coats? The kind you'd like your dog to have? Well, chances are dogs with good-looking coats and sturdy bodies get the right food. That's why you should feed your dog Kennel Ration. It's packed with vitamins and minerals, and he'll love it. You can actually see the chunks of lean red meat in every can. Choice cuts of U.S. government-inspected horse meat. Have Mom get Kennel Ration at her favorite dealer today. Kennel Ration.
Government-inspected horse meat.
Understand it. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment Company.
This is Global News. I'm Toby Kerr. The strike at one of Canada's busiest ports could soon be coming to an end.
The Senate is preparing to deal with back-to-work legislation that would force 1,150 dock workers at the Port of Montreal back on shift. Flow of millions of tons of goods came to a halt when the strike started Monday morning. House of Commons has approved the bill, with the Conservatives joining forces with the minority Liberal government. It must still be passed by the Senate. Canadian Union of Public Employees is denouncing the legislation, also saying the key to this dispute is the Maritime Employers Association extending workday hours without consulting its employees. Jerry Smith, the Canadian Press.
There will be a massive ramp-up of COVID-19 vaccines in our country starting next week. Major General Danny Fortin, who's responsible for the vaccine rollout, provided the latest dose distribution numbers.
We are set to receive 2 million doses weekly from Pfizer-BioNTech. In June, this is expected to increase to 2.4 million doses a week. For this quarter, it will bring the total expected of Pfizer-BioNTech doses to more than 24 million.
Canada has also received its first doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, 300,000 of them. As a result of the vaccine ramp-up, Ontario is expanding its COVID-19 vaccine eligibility. Global's Brianna Carnegie reports it means all adults who want their first dose can register to get one within a month.
Health Minister Christine Elliott anticipates every person aged 18 and up will be able to book their COVID-19 shot starting May 24th, Victoria Day. This is exciting news. Thanks to the increased supply, Ontario plans to send 50% of incoming
Both the Cargill plant and the JBS Canada facility were hard hit by outbreaks last year. Nearly half of Cargill's workers tested positive last spring. The plant was shut down for 2 weeks, while JBS reduced operations to a single shift each day for a full month. The two plants together process about 70% of Canada's beef. Legal experts say those who hold parties in violation of public health orders, where people later die of COVID-19, could face manslaughter charges. But a UBC law professor says it would be difficult to prove, it would be a difficult charge to prove, because the Crown would have to show that the person got COVID-19 from being at that gathering. Earlier this week, a BC provincial court judge told a man sentenced for repeatedly hosting massive condo parties that he would be guilty of manslaughter if any of the people at his party got COVID-19 and died, or they caused the death of another person. Nearly 3 months after...
If a reasonable person would foresee that you're putting somebody at undue risk of dying, then you're guilty of the charge. Okay, fine. You argue it in court.
Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour to conduct an independent external review of sexual misconduct in the military.
Madame Arbour will go and look deep within our system to determine what type of independent process is needed that will give confidence to our survivors.
That's Global's Mike LeCouture reporting. In sports, 2 matchups in the National Hockey League's North Division.
Well, this is creative.
Says trust has been undermined in the forces and operational effectiveness is at risk.
Maybe 6 years later, this might be the opportunity to actually put it right.
Her review will look into the force's promotion system that enabled toxic leadership. The military justice system, victims say, has failed them, and an external independent reporting mechanism outside the chain of command.
We have heard you, we have listened, and we are taking action.
The promised changes include a culture czar who will review the armed forces policies, but there's little detail on what newly minted Lieutenant General Carignan will do.
What powers that will be determined in the next few weeks as we are confirming and working a clear mandate.
Victims of military sexual assault, like Leah West, say the government has known about the need for external reporting for years, and it should have been announced today.
It should have happened then. It has not. And that is a failure, I think, of leadership on behalf of the Minister of National Defense and of the Chief of Government.
Up till I look at it. That's incredible.
So as you broke the story about sexual misconduct allegations against the former Chief of the Defense Staff, General Jonathan Vance, that is in large part what spurred this renewed focus on what is a long-standing problem in the military. Is this new external review going to look at the allegations against Vance? Donna, it will not look at the allegations against Vance, and I have that directly from Madame Arbour herself when I talked to her this afternoon. She said she will be looking at systemic issues in culture, but not specific cases. That leaves that case in the hands of military police and the military justice system, areas that victims have raised concerns about as to whether or not the system could lay charges or could actually carry out a trial if those charges are laid. Ultimately, victims remain skeptical but hopeful, Donna. Okay, Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa, thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Donna. I would like to bring into one little piece of that. I mean, they're not looking into specifics of all the cases, and the quote is that they're going to lead an independent external review into how the Canadian Armed Forces handles sexual harassment and misconduct allegations. Should be a pretty short review, because it seems like they're not doing nothing. Just saying. I hope something comes out of it, that's for sure, and I hope someone is taken into account for all of the stories. Okay, so what about proof of vaccination? We've heard about
was wearing a beautiful green dress with cloth trim and gold accessories. She looked lovely.
And what was Gary wearing?
Brown shoes, tan slacks, and a light jacket.
Oh, did he have a hat on?
I couldn't tell, it was cloudy. And I saw Shirley Temple.
I'm not interested in her.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jack. I thought you'd forgiven her already. Now, let me think. Oh, yes, I saw Van Johnson.
Van Johnson?
Yes, and you know, Jack, I feel very sorry for the poor guy. Every step he took, he was followed by dozens of girls. They just kept trailing after him for miles.
For miles? My goodness, you think those silly kids would get tired?
Yeah. Jack, may I have a chair? My feet are killing me.
Here, Mary, you can sit in this armchair.
Thanks. Gee, it's good to sit.
Hey, boss, Miss Livingston just found the other egg.
Well, hurry, Rochester. Get her a towel. Never mind the towel. Just bring a handful of corn. You know, Mary, every Easter there's another... I'll get it, Rochester. That must be my new car. Phil! Hiya, Jackson. Hello, Livy. Long time no see.
Hello, girlie.
Come on in. Say, Phil, we missed you in San Francisco. I know. I heard the program. What? You need me, Jackson. You need me. Phil, like Scotch needs soda, your program just don't fizz without the kid, Jackson. Phil, I need you like a moose needs a hat rack. Believe me.
Anyway, you should have been up there with us, Phil. We had a wonderful time. San Francisco's such a swell town.
Their employees be vaccinated. They need to balance keeping their place of business safe for not only all employees, but also all visitors or clients. Can an employer grab your arm and stick a needle in it? Absolutely not.
For Power, he's still mulling over his options, but says ultimately he will take the vaccine if he has to. Krista Dow, Global News.
Here's a different perspective. Hypothetically, if you needed to go to another country, and say it was a third world country, and in order to go to that third world country to work for your company, they said to you, you need to get shots for malaria or something like that.
That's not up to the company.
Tuberculosis or
It's
something.
not up to that's
And you are like, I don't want to get them. And I get it when the business says, well, we're not sending you to that
make
place
that decision.
at our risk of you getting sick,
Again,
dying,
their
or having to bring you home or get you health treatment down
They
there for
already
the
have to
costs
arrange to bring
associated
you
with
home.
that.
Still
They're
do.
responsible for you in that
not.
scenario.
No, they're not.
So that to me,
When is
because
your
there's life
employer
insurance when you go to
responsible?
work, right? Like I remember when in Radioland, when I used to do music radio, when we would travel to concerts, or we would do some
Governments of those
big,
countries won't let
you know,
you in as
broadcast
an
for the beaches of
outsider
the Caribbean
without being
kind of things.
vaccinated.
You had to sign all kinds of
They
waivers.
can't deal
There was a
with
time
you spreading
where I did
around their
one of those rappelling off a building fundraisers, and the company took out extra life insurance and said, if you want to rappel,
you have to sign this document that says it's not our fault and it's your choice. And as an exchange for that, we are taking out a larger insurance policy for the day on you. So I mean, if the job says in order to do this job,
this guy thinks it's normal for your boss
have to be
an insurance
okay to do the
policy
job.
on your life.
The risks
That
associated
doesn't
with
pay out
that
to you.
for the company need to be addressed too. It's probably different if you already work there though, and then somebody says, by the way, you lose your job if you don't get vaccinated.
It doesn't matter. It's not how it works.
No, San Francisco. Well, speaking of food has made me hungry. Hey, let's go out in the kitchen, kids, and get some sandwiches.
What? Oh, yeah,
Rochester, those sandwiches were very good.
They certainly were. Thanks. Mr. Wilson, would you like another bucket of coffee?
He's had enough. Now look, kid.
Isn't anybody going to say hello to me?
Oh, Dennis. Dad, when did you come in?
Oh, I've been here all the time. I was standing behind Mr. Wilson's right leg.
Oh. Well, say, kid, I tried to reach you on the phone last night, but nobody answered. Where were you?
Oh, my mother took me to the circus.
Well, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, and you should see those girls on the flying trapeze. They wore tights.
Dennis, they always wear tights.
Say, those trapeze acts are dangerous. Did any of them fall?
No, I guess they were all buttoned up.
She didn't mean that.
Oh.
Hey, how is the circus this year, kid?
Oh, it's swell. In one act, they shot a man out of the cannon and he landed right in my mother's lap.
My God, what'd your mother do?
She hung on to him and yelled, "I have a man in the balcony, doctor!"
Need oxygen supplies.
Supplies are arriving daily, but the need is immense. India is the second most populous nation, and the virus is raging. Different cities and regions have lockdowns such as Delhi, and many people are staying home. Others have no choice. They're needed at work. Crystal Gamanson, Global News, London.
All right, here on the shift, let's take a little look at some of the stories that are happening inside your cities and your provinces. In BC, understanding the communications and operational errors that led to confusion over pop-up vaccine clinics and how that could even happen in BC impact the future of COVID-19 vaccination programs there. This is Richard Zussman.
Why is the Premier not using the vaccine registry that people were told to use?
Pop-up, pile-up.
Ticket killers,
The concerns from the Lions here in Surrey being brought here to the floor of the BC Legislature.
Take the words of Pavan Dhaliwal from Surrey, and I quote, "Is this real life?"
The goal from government was to target pop-ups in high areas of COVID-19 transmission without having to register or make an appointment. In the end, more than 6,000 people got the pop-up jab, but beyond that, a failure.
These pop-up clinics have not been successful because they've undermined confidence in the process while immunizing a lot of people in critical neighborhoods.
Suddenly, we have chaos emerging where people who are able to get to the lineup get vaccinated.
The big part of chaos was around who got the vaccine. Right now, 10 of the 13 regions with the highest COVID transmission are in Fraser Health. But still, people from outside those areas came to get the shot, and some not eligible by age got it as well.
I think very small percentage, 3% that were under the age of 30.
If you don't live in Newton, don't go to the clinic in Newton. It's designed for that community.
The focus now shifting back to the age-based program, a big push on registering and then being notified when to.
Rochester, you wait right here in the car for me.
Boss, do you mind if I lean against that new Cadillac over there? It's good for my morale.
No, as long as you wait here.
Gee, what a high-class studio. Look at the way they got Frederick Marx's picture plastered all over.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Huh?
You can't go through this gate without a pass.
A pass? Well, perhaps you don't recognize me. If you knew who you were talking to, you'd let me go right in.
Oh, no, I wouldn't, Mr. Benny.
Oh, well, maybe I have a pass in my wallet. I'll take a look.
Well?
Wait till I open it. There.
First time this year, Mr. Benny?
No. Now, let's see. Here's a pass for Warner Brothers. Here's one for Universal International. Here's one for Biograph. Oh, here's something I don't need anymore. See, my draft card. You know, you can tear them up now, you know.
You could have torn that one up in 1918.
You don't have to be so... Oh, wait a minute, here it is. Gate pass to Samuel Goldwyn Studios.
Now, Mr. Goldwyn's office is right through that door. You go right down the hall and turn to the left.
Thank you. Da-da-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum, da-dum, da-dee-da-da-dum. Oh, hello.
Hello, Mr. Benny.
Da-dum, dum, dee-da-dee-dee, bum-bum-bum. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Benny.
Dum, dee-da-dee-da-dum, dum-dum-dum. Oh, hello. Hello, Mr. Benny.
Around even tougher restrictions.
Right now, patios are open, but people are only supposed to be eating with people they live with or.
Now, let's see. Gee, won't Mr. Goldwyn be surprised to see me? I hope he's... Oh, this must be his office here. I beg your pardon, miss, but is this Mr. Goldwyn's office?
Yes, sir.
Well, will you tell him that Mr. Benny is here to see him?
One moment, please. Mr. Goldwyn, Mr. Benny is here to see you. I'll find out. What is it you wish to see Mr. Goldwyn about?
A picture.
He wishes to see you about a picture. Yes, sir. He told me to give you one out of the top drawer.
No. You misunderstood. You see, I want to talk to him about making a picture. You see, a movie.
Oh, just a moment. Mr. Goldwyn, Mr. Benny wants to talk to you about making a picture. Yes, sir. Mr. Goldwyn is busy right now. Would you care to wait?
Well, thank you. Da-da-dee-da-da.
Confusing as an Albertan, I can say to know, well, is that us? Because I live in the area, but does that mean the kids don't have? Oh, my goodness. Well, things are not clear all across Canada, too. The province of Manitoba is working to address vaccine hesitancy in several areas of Manitoba, including Winkler. Joe Scarpelli caught up with people in the city to find out why.
Our conversations with people here in Winkler line up with the latest data from the province. While we did find some people who did get a coronavirus vaccine, many did not and will not, at least for now. And the biggest reason appears to be around what they consider to be a lack of information. Did you get a vaccine?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Well, the survival rate is like 99% depending on your age. They're still experimenting on it, so I would like to know more, for one thing.
People don't understand how much 1% is.
Would you consider getting the vaccine?
I don't know.
Do you know a lot of people in town who are feeling the same?
I know a few.
It's looking like it's safe, but I still would like to watch it for a year and see how things go. All of these things require time. You have to have time to see what the full effects will be. And so following, the lifestyle guidelines that they're implementing now, I feel comfortable staying as I am.
This man, however, did not hesitate at all to get a shot.
I have some health conditions and autoimmune deficiencies. It wasn't really much of a decision. I just assumed that's the best thing to do for my health.
Experts have been pushing for the vaccines all year, assuring people it is safe and their best way out of the pandemic.
We just have to keep working on the hesitancy. We have to keep bringing out the stories of why vaccination is important and showing, really the positive stories, but, whether it's Israel or it's the UK, or areas in the US where they've had really strong vaccination uptake, showing the sheer change we've seen in those communities.
For now, officials will continue to push for every adult to get a shot as soon as they can to help build towards herd immunity. Joe Scarpelli, Global News, Winkler.
Theory.
In Ontario, if all goes to plan, everyone under the age of 18, everyone over the age of 18 will be eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine by the week of May 24th, which is not far away, really. Travis Danraj has this.
It's an acceleration that will get millions of more shots into arms, all because supply is expected to surge.
Beginning next week, Ontarians will begin receiving a more predictable and increased supply of vaccines from the federal government.
Here's the schedule. Starting next week, people over 50, adults 18 plus in hotspots, and those with health conditions deemed high risk will be able to get vaccinated.
During the weeks of May 3rd and May 10th, 50% of upcoming vaccine shipments will be dedicated to hotspot communities.
The week of May 10th, those over 40 and anyone with conditions deemed at risk will qualify. May 17th, the age requirement drops to those 30 and older. Then, by the long weekend, the week of May 24th, all those 18 plus in Ontario can get immunized. There is still criticism, however. Vaccines aren't getting to everyone in the hardest hit areas soon enough.
114 postal codes will be included in these hotspots and will receive an increase in vaccines. This means that communities like Peel and Scarborough are still not getting their fair share.
The province also announcing starting tomorrow, they're rolling out a pilot project to get Pfizer into pharmacies.
16 select pharmacy locations in hotspot communities in Toronto and Peel will begin administering the Pfizer vaccine to individuals aged 55 and above. This will continue to expand to a broader base of communities later in May as supply allows.
More good news, the schedule for rollout could be accelerated even more depending on when allocations of Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines arrive.
The light at the end of the tunnel grows brighter every day.
What?
However, until the majority of Ontarians have received both doses of the vaccine, we all must continue to follow the public health measures we know work and keep us safe.
Reason for optimism tempered by time. Hope the other side of the pandemic is now only months away.
And officials with the government also said today that 3 large companies here in Ontario are starting vaccination clinics on site. Those companies include Maple Leaf Foods, Maple Lodge Farms, and Amazon. Good news for those essential workers that work at those companies, but still a lot of work to be done on that front.
All right, a conversation around murders in America that was inspired from last hour with Ryan Recker. A text message comes in from Rich in Carson City, and he wanted to share about St. Louis. And in the spirit of sharing some information, I will read his text. My family is in the St. Louis area, and I have a home there. Because St. Louis is reported as having the highest murder rate in America, which surprised us. What you need to know is that 2/3 of those murders happen in a small area on the north side known as the Triangle. It's an area where drug gangs carry their trade openly and defend their turf and settle scores with gunfire. That's also where police spend most of their time. From Rich. Thank you very much, Rich. Sounds to me like Rich wants everyone to know that St. Louis is pretty awesome. There's just one spot that seems to cause most of the trouble. Thank you very much for the text message. Right. Coming up next on The Shift, are you okay? We'll be right back.
We visited, we were not greeted with, oh, well, you Americans finally did it. We were greeted with, we did it. We, humanity, we human beings have put ourselves, our talents together, and we have done it. And I think that we have to build on that spirit, which was ephemeral.
And when history books come to be written, maybe centuries from now, when we look back at the arc of human achievement, over a very long time span. Where do you think landing on the moon, putting men on the moon, and seeing them walk on the moon will sit in terms of milestones achieved by our species?
I think two flights were very important, Apollo 8 and Apollo 11. Apollo 8, which didn't land on the moon, but was the first human vehicle to exceed escape velocity, was very important, perhaps as important as Apollo 11. Apollo 8 was about was about leaving. Apollo 11 was about arriving. 100 years from now, I'm not sure which historians would be prevalent in an argument whether it's more important that we left or more important that we arrived. I think both of those were monumental achievements, and they will be remembered as we proceed toward what I hope is Mars. And if we can leave for one and arrive with another, I think we can do the same thing. Although I may contradict myself and say that the first flight to Mars may be intentionally a one-way flight, so it would be leaving only and not well, leaving and arriving.
Mike Collins, thank you very much indeed for being on Hard Talk.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the U.S. is supported by Avalara, simplifying sales tax compliance with cloud-based solutions. Avalara.
But Mr. Goldwyn.
Now, look, Jack, I'm a busy man.
I know you are, Mr. Goldwyn, but it isn't as though I'm pleading for a job. I made lots of pictures. Call up Warner Brothers. They'll be very happy to recommend me to you. They'll be happy to recommend me to anybody. I mean, look, Mr. Goldwyn, if you'd only think it over, I promise you.
Pardon me, Mr. Goldwyn? What is it now, Pat?
We got to do something about the picture we're shooting on stage 5. The script we have now is a little dated. The hero was a bombardier on a B-29.
You're right. We should change it to something post-war, something civilian.
Well, why don't you make him a tail gunner on a Studebaker?
Let me help you out, Pat. He's a comedian. We'll talk about it later.
Tail gunner on a Studebaker. Well, I thought it was very funny, didn't it?
Maybe so, Jack. In fact, I think you're very good on the radio.
Pandemic started. Why is that? Are we more vain, more insecure, more afraid of getting old? How will I feel when I get my first treatment? That's Business Daily in a couple of minutes.
BBC News with Jerry Smith. At least 44 people have been killed in a crash at a crowded religious festival in the northeast of Israel. Over 100 more were injured at the Lag BaOmer festival, which takes place annually at the foot of Mount Meron. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, described it as a heavy disaster and said he was praying for the casualties. Tens of thousands of Orthodox Jews attended the festival.
Isn't he still before the courts on something?
The first U.S. consignment of emergency medical supplies has arrived in India, including hundreds of oxygen concentrators, ventilators, and other items